Hi everyone, this is Dr. Anurag Pande from Sabinsa Corporation, VP Scientific Affairs. And today I will be talking to you about one of our brand product called Curcumin C3 Complex, its genesis, its research, and how this ingredient shaped the future of curcumin in this industry. When it comes to curcumin or turmeric, for example, for an average consumer, it is the yellow colored spice or the flavoring agent. But over the last couple of years, it has found a lot of interest in its health benefits. In fact, the folklore and traditional knowledge has been well documented, its health applications. And today, it has been one of the hot favorite in the dietary supplement industry. But for curcumin, it has been a long journey since its traditional use to one of the most clinically researched product in the industry today. Millions of people put a lot of trust in curcumin in maintaining their health and managing their health conditions. Years of research into its chemistry, into its unique mechanism of action, several clinicals around the globe form the basis of this trust. And for the last 20 years, Sabinsa Corporation has been preserving and defending this trust for millions of its consumers for Curcumin C3 Complex. In fact, it will not be wrong to say that today Curcumin C3 Complex has become like again synonymous with curcumin itself. But start of any movement is never an easy task. When we first brought Curcumin C3 Complex in the market, we found that there was no concept of standardization. And truly said, in Ayurveda, in traditional knowledge system, there was no system of standardization at all. So two extracts would have two different level of ingredients or active constituents and different level of activity altogether. So at that point of time, Sabinsa started working with USP to generate what is now called as curcumin monograph. This monograph provides the basic framework to standardize the curcumin in the dietary supplement industry. A team of scientists along with Dr. Mohammad Majid, the founder of Sabinsa Corporation, in very early times of its curcumin's research, were able to establish the optimum level of curcuminoids in Curcumin C3 Complex. Later on, the Curcumin C3 Complex was patented for providing the maximum bioprotection through its curcuminoid composition, that is 95% curcuminoid. In fact, very early in the research, scientists at Sabinsa realized the importance of the three minor components like bis-dimethoxy and dimethoxycurcumin in their role in stabilizing the curcumin and to make it more soluble itself. When we first launched Curcumin C3 Complex, at that point of time, the curcumin had a strong image of an antioxidant. In fact, Curcumin C3 Complex itself had a very strong free radical scavenging activity. But in the years to come, a lot of research was done, clinical and functional research, on a lot of other, which explored a lot of other activities than just the curcumin's antioxidant activity. In fact, the science on curcumin greatly advanced with emergence of understanding on the role of inflammation in development of chronic diseases. We know now that inflammation is the root cause of all the chronic diseases. While it is not itself an evil, but inflammation, if it's left over and it's allowed to continue, it can become a chronic disease. Hence, its resolution is of top priority. A lot of studies were carried out with curcumin, which were able to explore the various mechanisms by which curcumin exhibits its anti-inflammatory activity. The studies using Curcumin C3 Complex were able to explore various pathways by which curcumin exhibits its anti-inflammatory activity against various inflammatory mediators such as COX-2, NF-kappa B, TNF-alpha, the tumorous necrosis factor, and INOS. One of the key enzyme in inflammation is the COX enzyme, where the cyclooxygenase enzyme, which catalyzes the conversion of arachidonic acid into prostaglandins. Now, COX-2 enzyme is inhibited by COX inhibitors, which are basically inhibiting the catalytic activity of the COX enzyme, whereas curcumin inhibits or reduces the COX expression at the transcription level itself. Another important mediator is the INOS. The nitric oxide, the inducive nitric oxide produced by INOS can actually attach itself or react itself with the superoxide anion and create peroxynitrides. These peroxynitrides can cause the cellular damage. A curcumin C3 complex was studied found that it can reduce the expression of INOS and also can reduce the nitric oxide production. One of the most important transcriptional factors that regulate the genes that are involved in the development of inflammatory molecules is NF-kappa B. Ubiquitous in all the eukaryotic cell, in response to an external stimuli, this NF-kappa B can dissociate from its inhibitor protein and then translocate into from the cytosol into the nucleus, attach itself to the genetic material, and then express various inflammatory molecules. Curcumin C3 complex was studied to find that it can inhibit the expression of NF-kappa B, and it's created other components or inflammatory molecules. Another important mediator is the TNF-alpha, which also can generate the NF-kappa B. And again, here we found that curcumin C3 complex research shows was able to reduce the expression of TNF-alpha as well. Now, several of these key studies were done on curcumin C3 complex, which paved the way for future human clinical trials. Today, curcumin C3 complex has a rich library of clinical studies and scientific studies. We have 69 papers in peer-reviewed journals, including 25 clinical studies, which makes curcumin C3 complex the most clinically studied and scientifically validated curcumin in the market today. Before I talk more on the clinical studies, I'd like to mention here that curcumin C3 complex is a dietary ingredient and is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. However, to explain certain activities of curcumin or pathways of curcumin, we have discussed inflammatory and cancer models in its description. Unlike the selective COX-2 inhibitors, which catalytically inhibit the COX-2 expression, curcumin, on the other hand, is able to inhibit the COX-2 expression at the transcription level itself. In one of the key studies, which was presented in American Association of Cancer Research, curcumin's pain-relieving activity was discussed. In 2005, Dr. Garcia and his team were able to find pharmacologically active level of curcuminoid in the human colorectal tissue while doing a clinical study using curcumin C3 complex. And while doing this, he also measured the lowering of COX-2 enzyme. In other studies done with curcumin C3 complex, we also found that curcumin C3 complex can reduce can suppress the progression of human cancer cell lines by reducing the NF-kappa B expression and also reducing the NF-kappa B regulated gene products. In a very interesting study on synergy of curcumin's anti-inflammatory action and its application in the field of temporary or occasional joint pain management, was studied in a formulation which was glucosamine-free and in a bilayer formulation called Nilitis. The results which came out of the study showed in the very short duration there was improvement in most of the indices of arthritis like WOMAC and VAS scales, which showed that curcumin's anti-inflammatory activity can be very useful in management of occasional joint pain. An area which has generated a lot of interest in recent times is the benefits of curcumin in Alzheimer's disease. And in this respect, in one of the first studies which was done on Alzheimer disease subjects was done on curcumin C3 complex. In fact, a study done by Dr. Fiala from UCLA showed that curcumin may be a good and safe approach in immune clearance of amyloidosis in Alzheimer disease subjects. In a latest study done on curcumin C3 complex, Dr. Ringman from UCLA again showed that curcumin C3 complex can be safe alternative for management of Alzheimer disease in geriatric patients. Now, these are preliminary studies and more detailed studies were required. When it comes to curcumin, one point which we cannot ignore or circumnavigate is the question on the bioavailability, and which has been greatly widely discussed and intensely debated nowadays. We, to some extent, we all agree that that bioavailability is an essential part of a drug delivery system, which affects the efficacy of the product and determines the efficacy of the product. Today, bioavailability is not just part of a drug delivery discussion, but it has become more of a marketing platform for several curcumin brands, which each labeling themselves as more bioavailable than the rest. In fact, the race among the competitors have become so stiff that claims of how many folds each is more bioavailable has reached to a shocking level, where one may wonder whether it is as good as taking an intravenous injection, which is of course not found to be safe in a couple of studies. 100% bioavailability can be achieved by an intravenous injection, which in this case with curcumin has been found to increase or prolong the QNT waves in heart, upsetting the heart rhythm and causing a dangerous level of arrhythmia in an animal study which was conducted some time back. So increasing the bioavailability to the nth level does not necessarily bring out the best out of curcumin also. More significantly, it was also found that despite all claims of high bioavailability, there have not been any clinical evidence which can prove that this increased bioavailability has led to any superior clinical results. In fact, these so-called bioavailable curcumins were able to reach the same endpoints in the clinical studies which earlier studies have reached without any bioenhancement of curcumin. So certainly bioavailability is not the only criteria in determining the efficacy. In fact, it will not be wrong to say that bioavailability can be a pathway, but it cannot be a destination. Looking back over curcumin C3 complex, we see 20 years of research, standardization, innovation, and a lot of clinical studies which this industry has very religiously followed. To sum it up, if you're looking for curcumin, look no further.